Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. I am Jeff Goldberg, obviously. And if you have not joined us before, you may not know I'm a sales coach and trainer. I work with individuals and organizations to help them increase their sales. And if you have joined us before, you know that every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, I either do a live training or a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And today is no exception. Before I introduce today's guest, I will say, first of all, happy May. It's May. We've made it past the winter, hopefully. It's my birthday month, which is exciting. I'm not going to tell you how old I'm going to be in a couple of days, but boy, oh boy, I am getting older than dirt. But I do want to remind you of this, and I've been reminding it almost every week. 1/3 of the year is over. A full third of the year is gone. That means you've got 2/3 left. Now, if you are not 1/3 of the way to hitting your financial goal for the year, now, like right now, is the time to get busy. Of course, 2 months ago was the time to get busy. But if you've been slacking off for any reason, now's the time to ditch the excuses and get busy. Because what you don't want to do is call somebody like today's guest or myself in October or November and say, hey, man, I'm not going to hit my quota. What the hell do I do? Because my answer is going to be, you should have called me in February. You should have called me in April. You should have called me at the beginning of May. So get busy now. There's still time to make it happen, but don't wait, because you don't want to make it to Q4 and go, what the hell's going on? And with that, let me introduce today's guest. He is a speaker, a trainer. He's a podcast host, and he's Florida's #1 transformational self-leadership coach. We're going to find out what that means. He empowers professionals and teams to lead themselves and others with greater clarity, confidence, and compassion. Please welcome Hakim Lakhdar. Hey, Hakim, How you doing, man?
I'm great. I love the pump up music. I love the intro. I'm feeling good on this Friday. Thanks for having me. And yeah, you said it right. The best time to start is yesterday. If not yesterday, then today.
Yeah. Well, let's start with this, because I've got a bunch of questions that I want to ask you, but could you maybe give us the 2 to 3 minute version of your background? What brought you up to this point?
Oh, all right. Let's concise this down to 2 or 3 minutes. So my background professionally is in executive education. So I spent a lot of time at the American Bar Association in Washington, D.C. I spent time in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. I spent a number of years at Harvard Law School working in the executive education space. And then again at Miami Law, also doing executive education, sort of on the leadership management side of things. And, through those 2+ decades of doing that work, I saw these conversations time and time again around, what's showing up for the individual in terms of how they lead and how they meet the day and how they lead their teams and their businesses and their clients and how they navigate challenges within an industry and all of that. And it was, global. This wasn't just unique to one region or one state or one profession. And I thought that was always so interesting to me. So I decided, look, time to hang my own shingle. And I'm not a lawyer and I had no aspirations of being a lawyer, but I said, you know what, I want to build a practice around these types of conversations. And I've been doing it the last 5 or 6 years, and it's been a journey.
And it has nothing to do with beer 30, right? Or does it?
Well, so this is one of my clients. Yeah. So this is one of my clients, the Fifth Ingredient. And I always love repping them when I can. They're a fantastic SaaS company out of California, but yeah, they got a great little product.
So let's talk about leadership. Let's start with, how do you define leadership, and what is self-leadership? What's the difference between leadership and self-leadership?
Yeah. So leadership's interesting because I think a lot of times we hear the debate between what's leadership, what's management, right? And management in terms of supervisory responsibilities is pretty cut and dry, right? It's pretty straightforward. But I think leadership, as I often describe it when we're doing trainings or I'm working with clients one-on-one, leadership really is the responsibility to develop those around you. So from a sort of an external perspective, leadership is your responsibility is to ensure that the people around you feel supported. There's an environment where they feel empowered, they feel challenged, they feel guided, they feel motivated and inspired to bring their best selves to work. If you can do that as a leader, then you can check leadership off the box as a home run. And then the self-leadership piece about this, which I think is really interesting, is leadership isn't possible without self-leadership first. And self-leadership is actually focusing on yourself and how you're showing up and how you're communicating and how you're connecting and how you're doing what you do as a leader first before you actually go out and do it, so that it has the impact, has the effect, and sort of meets the intention that you're bringing to your leadership role.
Gotcha. Okay. So you mentioned management. So what's the difference between leadership and management?
Yeah. Well, so management is very much tactical, And I see that as, here are the steps that we need to take to accomplish X goals. I mean, think about project management, right? People management is very much the same way. You're sort of, you're putting the right people in the right seats, and you're making sure that they're doing the right things in order to accomplish a goal. And you're actively involved in that process with them. Leadership is much more transformational. It's really about, giving people the space and the support to go off and do what it is that you hired them to do. So it's a lot less hand-holding and a lot more guiding and inspiring.
Got it. So the two are not mutually exclusive, right? A manager can be a leader and a leader can be a manager, right?
100%. Absolutely. And you don't have to lead others to be a leader. I mean, this is one thing I love to ask in, big talks I'm giving. I'll say, raise your hand if you're a leader, and maybe half the room will raise their hand. And I'm thinking, the other half of you, why didn't you raise your hand? I mean, just because you're not leading a group of people doesn't mean you're not a leader. You can be a leader and sort of lead by example and do the things that a leader does, even if you're not supervising or managing a group of people.
So I have been a manager of people and a leader of people in various times of my life, in various roles. And now I'm a solopreneur. So it seems that self-leadership then becomes much more important to somebody like me. So what is self-leadership for somebody like me? I'm not leading a team, although I do that on an outsourced basis, but mainly in my business, I'm just taking care of myself every day. So how does that affect, how do we make sure that we're doing the right things to lead ourselves properly?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way I usually think about it is in this sort of concept of outside in thinking versus inside out thinking. So outside in thinking is this idea that everything outside us affects the way that we make decisions, the way that we evaluate opportunities, the way that we communicate, energetically, the way that we show up, the way that we connect with people, how we feel in the day, how we react to certain things. That's outside in. And it's, it's kind of normal. I mean, what's happening in the world, what's happening in politics, what's happening socially, what's happening in your own family, all that stuff outside of yourself affects the way that we show up in a day. And the self-leadership piece says, let's actually flip that. Let's start from the inside out. And let's actually get clear on, all right, if I'm waking up today, let's do a little self-audit. How am I feeling today? What do I want today to be? How do I want to show up? Who do I want to connect with? Why do I want to connect with them? How do I want them to feel in that connection? When we start to think from the inside out, we start to shape our outside world from that place because we're clearer on how we're showing up. The inside piece is much more clear to us, which then gives us the confidence. And this is, sort of my 3 C's, but that confidence comes from that clarity that we have from the inside. And then we shape our outside world from there.
So, you mentioned the 3 C's, and you have 3 C's for leaders, and they are clarity, confidence, and compassion. Can you elaborate on those a little bit? Why are those 3 C's so important in a leader?
Yes, I think for me, clarity is where it all starts. I think there's a lot of different schools of thought around this where people will say, well, you got to take action in order to create clarity. And yeah, I think that's right. But you've got to have clarity to decide what action you ultimately want to take, because you don't want to be spinning your wheels doing something that you either don't feel connected to or that, isn't in service of the goals you're trying to create. So clarity first and foremost. And clarity isn't just clarity around the vision or what the goal or objective is. It's clarity around your core values, right? Mine are awareness, compassion, and joy. I know that whoever I'm working with, whatever I'm doing, has got to touch on 1 or 3, of those core values.
What were they again?
It's awareness, compassion, and joy. So my core values. And if someone that I'm working with, or something that I'm doing doesn't touch on 1 or all 3 of those, I know it's probably something I don't want to do. It's probably someone I don't want to work with. So that makes it very easy for me to decide, where I'm going to spend my time and energy. So that clarity first and foremost, clarity around what the objective is here, who's on your team, clarity around who you are as a leader, clarity around what's happening in your life that's impacting the way that you show up. I mean, clarity around all the things that we in the day ask questions about. Anytime I tell my clients, if you find yourself saying, well, I think this, or, I'm not sure about, I'm like, that's an opportunity. It's an invitation to get more clarity. Go have that conversation with someone. Research that topic a bit more if you're really unsure about it. And then once you have that clarity, it naturally gives you the confidence to then go out and take that action. And that
before we get to confidence and compassion, I want to stick with clarity just for a second, because I believe that one of the things that all salespeople need is what I call an ICP, an ideal client profile, where you're defining what your best client looks like. And it sounds like that's right in line with exactly what you're saying. One of your core traits is joy. Like one of the things in my ideal client profile is, if you're not going to be fun to work with, I'm not going to work with you. I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
And I think that clarity helps me attract the right type of client, because most of the people who do show up are the people that I'm looking for. And I hope that's part of my marketing. I hope that's part of my social media. But I think it's also part of that clarity in my mind that I'm at an age and a level of success, thank goodness, that I don't want to work with anybody that I don't want to work with anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to take deals that are not going to be good for me and them. And if you're not, look, I say life is short. When you're 20, it seems like it's forever. But at my age, I'm telling you, I'm definitely looking at the back nine. I think I have plenty of time, but I know I'm at the back nine, and I'm just simply not willing to waste a minute being miserable.
Yeah.
There's enough stuff going on in the world that can make you out of your mind and crazy. So to me, it's like, how do you get, and that brings us to joy. How do you get as much joy as you can on a daily basis, given we live in a chaotic world? Yes.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a great example of clarity, because you can imagine, we've all been there. When I was starting my business, it was yes to everything, right? Yes, 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 because we're building a business, and you're thinking, I don't want to sacrifice or compromise or jeopardize any opportunity that's being brought my way. But that was also coming from a lack of clarity, right? I mean, it was because I wasn't sure who my ideal client was, or how this business would grow, or what it looked like, to achieve success in this business. But then as I got more and more clear on that, I could start creating things that, I was either a stand for or stand against, things I wanted to invest my time and energy in. So that clarity is a big one. And the ICP is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And you were saying that clarity gives you confidence.
That's right. Because just like you were saying, and you were saying it with such confidence, right? Now that I have that clarity, I can confidently say, yes, I'm excited to work with you, or, you know what, I don't think this is the right fit, or we're not the right person for you. Thanks. But, let me put you in touch with somebody else.
Exactly.
And that comes, and that is to be able to have those conversations. And when I'm talking to clients all the time around difficult conversations don't have to be so challenging if you're coming from a place of real clarity, because it gives you the confidence to then go into those conversations and know you can handle yourself, and you're working with all the information that's available to you because you've already sought out that clarity. So the same is true in sales calls, right? And if you find yourself balking or waffling or stuttering through a conversation, well, there's probably a clarity issue there. And when you get clear on that, then you show up a lot more confidently. And then for me, the last one is compassion. And the compassion is, you're not going to get it right every time. It's compassion for other people, but it's really more importantly in the self-leadership context, compassion for yourself. Look, you're going to stumble and fall. You're going to mess up a call. Your calendar is going to get off, and you're going to be late for something. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. Have a little bit of compassion for yourself, a little bit of grace. And the same is true for other people. They're 2 minutes late for a call, and then you're already getting yourself all worked up. You go, my time's valuable, and I'm not sitting here for 2 minutes waiting for some. It's like, whoa. Take a breath. Maybe that person had a really troubling phone call that just came in, right? Maybe that person hasn't been feeling well, but they still decided to keep the call with you, even though they're not feeling well, and they wanted to make sure that they got some water before they got on a call with you. I mean, who knows what the reasons are, but having that level of compassion just lets you put down sort of the weight of the day sometimes.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I have zero compassion for people who show up late for meetings.
Yeah, I get it.
They're absolutely positively zero.
I feel the same way.
Here's what I actually do. If we have a 9 a.m. meeting on Zoom, when my clock turns to 9:06, I'm done. And I'm like, I'm done with you. I just have no space for that. I operate on what I call the airport theory of time management. If you show up to the airport a minute late with the best excuse in the world, the plane took off.
Doors closed.
That's just me. So I sometimes find it hard to be compassionate, and I understand shit happens. I get it.
Of course.
Look, I'm sometimes late too, and it makes me just as great. It actually makes me crazier when I'm keeping other people waiting than when people keep me waiting. But it is hard for me to have compassion in that one. I'd like to add in a fourth. You're welcome to use it.
By all means.
And for me, that's come from. What's your come from? Because you mentioned having hard conversations, and look, I don't like having hard conversations. I don't like conflict. There's another C for you, but my come from is always, I'm here to do my best to serve you. Yeah. And if that means we have to have a tough conversation, I say, look, you got 30 days, or otherwise you're not going to make it here. Then that's what I'm going to do. Because again, I don't have time to waste. And I don't think you're being compassionate with people when you're not coming from the right place, when you're avoiding that tough conversation. I mean, again, I don't want to have those, but sometimes it's the appropriate thing to do. Yes.
Yeah. I'll take that on, and I'll put it on as like a subset or a sub, category under clarity, because that come from, you have to be clear on that, right? I mean, there's getting clarity around what your intentions are. Like what's the purpose of this phone call? what's the purpose of this conversation, right? If it's to serve your ego, well, then you're not building trust. And there's a different motivation behind this conversation. But if you know and you're clear on what your come from is, even if you misstep or you misspeak, you know, that person is going to feel from you that your purpose for being in this conversation is genuine, and that you're clear on it. And that gives you the confidence to sort of stay in that conversation. The thing we say all the time in our training is clarity is kind. So leaders will always say like, well, you know, I don't want to be too direct, or, you know, I don't want to be too heavy handed. And I said, look, you can throw all the words out there that you want, but what all you're providing is clarity. And then when you think about, you know, expectation setting on a phone call or a sales call, clarity is the kindest thing you can do for someone. Just be clear. If you can be clear, then you're at least operating from the same, you know, bit of information, and then you can go from there.
Yeah. And I'm going to add in that you're 100% right, that on top of all that, if you don't include the compassion, then you might be screwed. Because I know for me, one of the things I do is outsourced or fractional sales management. Mm-hmm. And I've been a national sales director and branch manager and things like that for years. And I stopped doing that because I didn't want to deal with salespeople on a full-time daily basis, but I still do it on an outsourced basis. And sometimes when they're not doing what I expect them to do, what I believe I've clearly communicated, it's often hard for me. I actually have to take a moment, because my initial reaction is, what the F? I'm paying you a salary. I'm training you. I've told you exactly what I'm looking for, and you're not doing it. Yeah. And that's not a conversation that's going to help somebody. So I actually have to pause and realize that there's some reason on the other side why that's not getting done. And I have to almost, I like to point the finger back at me first and take responsibility. But I think my point here is that if I go with my first reaction, which is I just want to kill somebody, that's not going to help. That's not very supportive. That's not going to help them. That's not going to get them to do what I'd like them to do and what I know is good for them. So I actually, the compassion piece is absolutely has to be a part of it, because my first reaction is, let's just kill everybody.
Yeah. And it's not meant to be. I mean, I think when we hear the word compassion or care, you know, we think of that as a very fluffy concept in leadership. And I don't mean it to be. I mean it to be actually quite practical, because if you think about even the 3 C's, and I don't ever present it this way, but if you think about it as sort of like this cycle, right? You know, you start with clarity, it builds your confidence, and then you approach things with compassion. Well, the compassion then drives you, it compels you to want to seek more clarity, right? Because even the example that you gave, like, what the F are you doing? I gave you the tools, go off and do it. Well, if you pause and you actually realize there's something driving that behavior, right? The compassion is telling you, hey, let me take a beat here. What's driving this behavior? You know, the expression we use all the time is seek to understand before being understood. And if that compassion then puts you right back into clarity, now you're back into clarity. I want to try to understand what's going on here, because I've given you all the tools. Is this a skill thing or is this a will thing? Right? And then once you get clear on that, now you get the confidence to say, okay, cool. So here's what I expect out of you. And here's what we're going to do in the next week. Are you good with that? Yeah, I'm good with that. Cool. All right, great. Well, hey, if you need anything, you let me know. It just goes round and round and round.
Yeah. So why is it that so many people who are clearly, they're capable, they're high performers, why is it that so many of those people often feel stuck or maybe inconsistent?
Yeah, I think it's something that's true for all of us, you know, whether we find ourselves, you know, stuck, or we just find ourselves resistant to something or hesitating on something or second guessing something. And we all have it. It's our inner critic. And our inner critic is just that, you know, voice in our head that, you know, when we were younger was trying to keep us safe. And then as we got older and started collecting all of these stories and all these experiences and a bit of this history, it started to create a story around, well, you know, don't reach out to that person. They're too busy. They don't want to hear from you. Or, you know, don't push too hard. They're going to think you're a jerk, or they're going to think that you're sleazy. And it's all based on assumptions and judgments. And what it does, it just kind of gets in our way. And if you can distinguish between when your inner critic is actually running the show, or there's something genuinely blocking you, then you can either say to your inner critic, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I don't need that. You're just getting in my way. Or you can see what's actually blocking you, and you can either talk through it, or you can address it, or you can resolve it, and then get back into action. And I think that's where a lot of high performers really struggle, is they're thinking, man, I'm so used to success. Now something's in my way. And it's like, all right, well, don't beat yourself up about it. It's just a learning opportunity. What is it that's actually in your way? Let's get clear on what it is. And then let's just sort of pick it apart, and then you'll start to see it dissipate. And then you can keep moving forward.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned self-talk because I'm very big on that, and I often like to say, when I tell people, there's a voice inside your head that's constantly talking to you, and if you don't know what voice I'm talking about, it's the voice that just said, "What voice is Jeff talking about?" Because it is so.
Yeah.
I mean, part of self-leadership is monitoring your self-talk because
100%.
most of the time, well, I'm not sure if it's most of the time, but a lot of the time, the self-talk is negative. I'm so fat. I'm so stupid. I'm so this. I'm so that. And my coaching is always, and I'm not a leadership coach like you, but is always, when you hear yourself talking like that, don't beat yourself up, which is what you just said. Just acknowledge, oh, you know what? I just told myself I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. I may have acted stupidly here. And I might have even shared this with you when we first spoke, that, my kids are 25 and almost 24. And not once in 25 or 24 years did I ever tell my kids, you're stupid, you're bad. Yeah. And I did say, you're behaving badly, stop that. But I didn't want my kids growing up thinking, yes, I'm stupid, because our brain is listening to everything we hear from everybody else and our own self-talk. Yes. And if we don't monitor that, then we can get into trouble. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the distinction I always make, and it's just a very benign example, is like, oh, I'm so terrible at this. And it's like, well, it's not that you're terrible at this, it's that your inner critic is trying to convince you that you're terrible at this. And if we start to peel back the layers, you start to realize, well, it's trying to convince you that you're terrible at this because there's a risk of what? Embarrassment, failure, success. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's a mechanism that's trying to keep you safe, but it just doesn't know the difference between like what's real, what's not. And if you can hear that inner critic or that inner voice saying to you, oh my gosh, you're terrible at this. It's like, no, I'm not terrible at this. I'm not stupid. Like you were saying, this is just you trying to convince me of that. I mean, public speaking, you and I've talked about this, when you get up on stage, your inner critic's going crazy. Look at all the people, you're not one of them. Who are you to be talking to them about this? And it's like, shut up. This isn't going to help me, because the reality is I don't know that to be true. And that's the sort of the question I always ask, my clients to say, like, can you say for 100% certainty that that's a fact? If you can't, that's your inner critic running the show.
Yeah. See, I'm wired up strange. When I'm on a stage, I'm not thinking any of that stuff, because I know who I am and what I'm there to do. But I do sometimes afterwards go, why does anybody listen to me? Don't they know what an idiot I am sometimes? But I am. Look, I'm a genius and I'm an idiot. I have both parts of me at various times. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the word sleazy before, because so many people, especially the people that I'm talking to mostly nowadays, they have the opinion that selling is sleazy. Yep. I've created a program called the Sales Confidence Lab, which is designed specifically for what I call the accidental salesperson. Mm-hmm. So I'm a professional salesperson for 50 years. That's all I've ever done. But coaches like yourself, consultants, creatives, solopreneurs, you did not become a coach because you wanted to sell. I would not think. But if you can't sell, you can't serve. And most of the time, and I'm not saying this is you, of course, Hakim, but most of the time, coaches, who's real target market these days, selling is sleazy. You got to be pushy. You got to be aggressive. They hate asking for money. They certainly don't want to be thought of as a salesperson. And it really is all mindset. It's that little voice telling you selling is sleazy, selling blah, blah, blah. In fact, it's a 12-week course, and the entire first 2 hours is just helping people get the mindset that they need and getting rid of all what I call head trash. Yeah. But we have that little voice that's talking and we think it's true.
Yeah. You're right, though. It is head trash, right? I mean, like, look, and I sold my Cutco knives when I was in college, and I got wrapped up in that. And the fact is, when I came out of that, I was thinking, okay, that's not something I want to do in my career. I do not want to be going and selling $90 knives to friends and family. And I had associated sales with being pushy or, having a script or a shtick or, here, let me watch me cut the shoe or, like all that stuff. And I was just thinking, given what I do, if I show up that way, I mean, people are going to see through that immediately. And that was never a way that I wanted to show up. So I had to do a lot of work when I started my business around what sales meant for me and how I could show up authentically. What was a process that worked for me? And I went through countless sales trainings and workshops and coaching programs so that I could understand the various ways to do sales and then create my own version of that. Right. I mean, something that really aligned with me, something that felt really authentic and easy for me to do. And you and I have talked about this, that for me, selling is very, very much service. It's not me selling, it's me serving. And I'm going to serve and serve and serve until someone says, how do we get started? Like, what does it look like to work with you? Or they say, not for me right now, but thanks anyway. And I say, great. Well, thanks for a wonderful conversation. And we move on with our lives. But I think that icky feeling that we sometimes, associate with sales when we think about the used car salesperson or the snake
Sure.
oil salesman, all of these expressions that people associate with sales, it's like, that's all up in your head. Because if you go in thinking that you're going to be that, you're going to be giving off that vibe, and you're going to be trying to fight through that instead of actually leaning into the service aspect of it.
Yeah. And that comes back to come from, because
Yeah.
my come from is the same as yours. My job is to serve.
Yeah.
And that sometimes means helping you enroll in my class. And sometimes it means me saying, you know what, I'm not right for you. Let me introduce you to somebody else who is. But it's always that place of service. Zig Ziglar, who was a famous motivational speaker years ago, used to talk about that the word serve comes from the Swedish word selja, S-E-L-J-E, that it means to serve. It doesn't. I actually looked it up. It doesn't mean that. But I love that concept that our job is to serve others when we're selling. It's not to make money. The making money is the reward for the service.
Right. That's right.
It's the service is the price we pay to get. It's like going to a gym.
Yeah.
Do you go to a gym because you love going to the gym? Well, maybe some people do. I never did. But you pay the price to have a good body or a healthy body by lifting weights and doing cardio and all that stuff. So the service, which to me feels like a good thing, but if you want to look at it as a negative, well, that's the price you pay to get paid. So
That's
come
right.
from a place of service as opposed to I have to make some money because I got to pay the rent. Because I believe that prospects can smell need and greed like dogs can smell fear. And when you have commission breath, people know it. So when you come from, I'm truly here to explore whether I can help you or not, and let's do that together. It's a whole different story.
Yeah.
You talk about the way that there's a gap between what we say and what we do, and I find that's quite often true.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that gap exist, and what creates that?
Yeah. Well, we've sort of been talking a little bit about it, right? I mean, I think it's the intentionality behind what we say we're going to do and then what we actually do. And that gap, if it's pretty wide, we're not establishing much trust with people in our lives, in our, our businesses, in our, our client list. Because I think a lot of that comes down to when we say we're going to reach back out to someone, what happens in the in-between? And this is a little bit of the self-talk that you were talking about, but also like, what happened the last time that you reached out to somebody? Did you get shut down? And then you decided, I'm never doing that again? And is that now your new story? Is that your new core belief that, when I follow up with someone the day after we speak, they're going to shut me down? So then you don't do that anymore. So we say that we're going to do something, but then we end up not taking the action to do it. The self-leadership piece that I always put, sort of offer to clients is let's be with what's happening in between. Let's start noticing that a little bit more, not from a place of judgment, not from a place of right or wrong, good or bad, but just a place of noticing. And then as you start to do that more naturally and you notice what's happening between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do, you'll start to see some patterns. And then that's where the self-leadership piece comes in. You get to decide what you want to do from there.
So there's also what we say we want and then what actually shows up. Like often we have great intentions. We've got the best of intentions. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do the other thing, but we're still not getting the results that we say we're looking for.
Yeah.
So what's actually happening internally when someone just isn't showing up the way they say they want to?
Yeah. So I do a whole results triangle where I talk about this and break it down, especially if I'm giving like big public talks, because I like people to understand what goes into these results. And the way that I break it down, and I'll do it very, very quickly, is this idea of around action and mindset. So action and mindset are not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, your action is influenced by your mindset is influenced by your action. Both need to be aligned in order to create great results. And usually that's where everybody stops. They're like, all right, take the right action, be in the right mindset, got the results I need. It's like, yeah, there's a lot more to it. Actually, what influences the action that you take, the mindset that you're in, are your views, opinions, and beliefs. Because the view, opinion, and belief that you hold will determine what mindset you're in, will determine what action you choose to take. What influences your views, opinions, and beliefs are your values and your priorities. So that was like the core values I was talking about earlier. Those are such an important piece of that. As a salesperson, as a coach, as a service provider of any kind, what's core to you is going to affect how you view or believe or have opinions about things, and then ultimately the action you take or the mindset you're in. And then last but not least on that sort of diagram of a triangle is space. And I push this idea of space so hard that people, they almost can't grasp the concept because they're like, I don't have time to do what you're talking about. I was like, that's part of the problem, right? That's part of the challenge, is creating space in your day to take a breath before your next call, to step outside and just reflect on the call you just got off of, right? I mean, that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we understand how we're showing up, when we create space. But if it's boom, 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 and we know this, I mean, we go from Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call all day. And then the end of the day comes around, and then you go right into homework with the kids, and then dinner, and then bedtime. And it's like, whoa, where are you creating space to actually reflect on the day and say, what am I taking into the next day? What am I going to do differently?
Yeah. I don't believe in coincidences. I don't believe there really are coincidences in life. So it's no coincidence that before we got onto this call, I was taking a shower, and I listened to the news while I'm in the shower, and they were interviewing the astronauts who just went, up to the moon, and they were asking a lot of questions. And one of the astronauts was saying that, one of the things that's so amazing when you're out there is space. And I don't just mean that you're in outer space. It's the space. It's like you're not looking at a picture with little stars up there. You're in the stars, and you get this way different picture of what space really is. So, and you're talking about creating the space for yourself to take the time to think and consider and slow down when you need to. Like I build in, I use Calendly for my appointments, and all my clients have my Calendly, and they can book appointments whenever they want. But I have it built in so that there's got to be, depending on which kind of meeting it is, at least 5 minutes between meetings, and sometimes 15, because I need that space, because otherwise I am running from meeting to meeting to meeting. And your brain needs some time to analyze, slow down a little bit, take that deep breath. Am I right?
Yeah. And to shift gears, right? I mean, each person you're talking to, if you think about this in a sales capacity, they've got different motivations for being on that call with you, right? I mean, they're from a different part of the world with a different background. They've had a different morning than the other person that you spoke to just an hour ago. So being able to shift gears so that you're open and receptive to what you're walking into. I mean, I've seen it time and time again with either clients or even in my, my W-2 professional life, where we go to these meetings and people would come in all flustered. And I'm thinking, where are you coming off of? And how did you not transition from where you were before to where you are now? And they'd bring that into the meeting. And then all of a sudden you could feel them. And I would say, like, before we get started, let's just take a couple deep breaths, like just to transition. And I'm not walking anybody through a meditation or, everyone closing their eyes and saying, but I'm saying, just take a couple deep breaths, just as a little reset, just so you can transition out of whatever you just came from to where you are now. And I think, in a sales capacity, you want to bring your best self to every call. And, coaching's the same way. I want to be a blank slate for my next client. And I need to have that time and space to do that.
Yeah, I have a dear friend, probably my best friend in the world, who's a divorce attorney. And at one point he told, we constantly talk about success and life and stuff like that. And he was telling me as a practice that before he goes into any meeting, when you're representing somebody in divorce, the other side is typically, they're ready to kill. Yeah. And he says that he actually closes his eyes and he talks to God and he says, please give me the strength to serve both these parties and have a great outcome. And that just that little reset allows him to, because I love him desperately, not just because he's my best friend, but his come from as a divorce attorney is always, let's work this out as easily as possible. This doesn't have to be deadly, but if it gets deadly, he will rip your lungs out. He's that guy. So he wants to come from that space of peace and love and om and all that stuff. But he knows how to make that switch. But it's that reset, that intention before you go into a meeting, which can make all the difference, as opposed to, do we just want to kill each other, or can we maybe work this out? Yeah. There's something I have to ask you about. And I'm watching the time. We still have plenty, but I don't want to miss this one. Whenever I'm doing one of these, I always go to people's websites and their LinkedIn feeds to look for questions. And on your site, the Training Rock, you have pictures and biographies of the leadership experts beside yourself that work with you. And under their picture, it names animals. One is cheetah, lion, dog. One was ant, dog, lion. Now, I love this kind of stuff. What is the Training Rock and what do the animals mean?
Yeah, the Training Rock is a fantastic company out of the UK run by a good friend of mine, Joe Andrews. And it's an assessment called the Trait Test. It's based off of Carl Jung's personality archetypes. And rather than, sort of get super academic with it, Joe came up with the idea of let's just do animals. Let's attribute animals to these, personality types. And when you take the assessment, you get your top 3. And these are sort of there are 9 of them. We are all 9, but we default typically to our top 3. And mine are dog, lion, ant. And so for me, dog has strengths and it has vulnerabilities. And so the idea is that each of these animals have a strength. So lion, for example, I'm a natural born leader. I like to step in. I like to guide. I like to offer up solutions. I like to be in a leadership role. And the vulnerability side to that, or the shadow side of it, if you want to think of it that way too, is that in certain situations, so like if my control is challenged, then all of a sudden, if that fear is triggered, I slip into my vulnerability, and that great leader of all those strengths of the lion ends up being vulnerabilities, and I start becoming intense, intimidating, controlling, demanding, all of those things. So it's just this sort of awareness piece of, hey, if I'm operating from my strengths, this is how I show up. But if I'm triggered by my fear, then this is how I could potentially show up. And if we can start to see that, then we start to notice it a lot more easily.
I actually started taking the test this morning before this interview.
Good.
After the shower before this, but I got 2 questions in and I saw there were 45 and I'm like, I just don't have time for this. I'll go back and do it. But I'm hoping that dog is one of the ones for me, simply because I believe that dogs are the best thing on the planet. They're just simply the best. I want to be my dog. I have to, not just because he has a great life. Well, I hope he has a great life. To me, he does it. I mean, he just loves unconditionally. Right. He's always happy. I mean, it's like dogs are just I really truly believe that dogs are truly the best thing on the planet.
Yeah.
There's nothing like them.
We just got our first family dog over the fall, and I had never had a dog growing up. So I've been able to, enjoy, that experience in the last several months. And going back to the trait test, when you think about dogs are phenomenal, and you want a dog on your team, right? They're friendly. They're supportive. They're loving, they're warm, they love unconditionally, as you mentioned, right? But then the dog's fear is rejection. So if you are, high dog, which I am too, and there's a fear of rejection, then we slip into the vulnerability, which becomes people pleasing. We become a bit insecure. And you can imagine, even like your dog, if like you were to yell at your dog or you were angry at your dog about something, like that tail goes down, and they sort of scurry over into the corner and they withdraw, and all of a sudden you're not getting the strengths and the things that you love about the dog in that same way. People are the same way, and I don't mean to compare people to dogs, but in this sort of personality context, there are those things that trigger us to operate from our vulnerabilities versus our strengths.
I'm laughing because you clearly don't know my dog. I yell at him regularly because as much as I love him, I also want to kill him half the time. Mostly on walks, because his walk is not a walk. His walk is, I want to sniff everything for the next half hour at least. And, when it's cold outside or it's windy or something like that. And I'm like right now, my allergies are acting up because I'm allergic to tree pollen, grass pollen. And we're outside. I'm like, dude, come on, we got to go. But he does not back off. He'll just look at me like, what? You're yelling at me? Come on, man.
Because he knows you're not really mad.
Absolutely not. You recently posted about when people ask, how are you? The answer is often, I'm so busy. And you suggest that we give a more honest answer. Mm-hmm. I personally find that quite often when people greet you with how are you, it doesn't really mean how are you. They're really just saying hello. Like when I used to work in offices, you walk by someone, they go, how are you? And they keep on walking. Well, my thing was always, if you really wanted to know how I was, you probably would have stopped and waited for an answer.
Right.
So when people do say, how are you? Why should we be more honest in our answers when people ask?
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that is it's such a great opportunity to build trust. When someone asks you how you are, and obviously, you're feeling out the situation or circumstances, and you're not just like stopping someone as they're on their way into a meeting or something, but you actually share how you're doing without oversharing, right? But you're sharing how you are. It's been a tough morning, but I'm turning it around and feeling good about the rest of the day. Something like that. It resonates differently because that person might have had a tough morning themselves too. And they're like, wow, here I am thinking I'm the only one in the office having to power through this tough morning I've had. And that person just shared openly that they're having a tough morning too. And look at the smile they had in their face. And they were willing to share that with me. Whether it's a conscious thing or not, trust has now just been leveled up. and that person's walking off from, that quick exchange thinking, I like that. That did something for me. That was a little shift in me. And it's a shift in the person who shared it because they sort of unloaded a little bit of that with, to someone who asked. And I think that finding that, that delicate fine line between oversharing and sharing is important. But I think that if we answer that question honestly, more often, trust is being built and connections are being built much more than just a good, and then you just walk by.
Gotcha. Now you've had a varied career. I was fascinated reading about it, including you worked as an actor and a stunt professional. Tell us about working on Spanish-speaking soap operas.
as a non-Spanish speaking person too. I'd played music, guitar, and sang down in Key West, Florida for a little while at Irish Kevin's on Duval Street, and loved that. And I had, this real desire to entertain and, to be part of the entertainment industry. And I went to graduate school and opted not to stay down in Key West. I think, my liver thanks me. And went to graduate school in Indiana. And when I came back, I still had that bug, I still had that itch to want to do some more acting and see where that would go. So I was doing a little bit of that. And then I got this opportunity to be a stand-in for a lead actor. And that particular person was doing a feature film. And there was one scene where he had to fall down the stairs. And this guy was an older gentleman. And he said, "Hey, I'm too old for that. I'm not falling down the stairs. Let this guy do it." And they pointed to me. And I said, "Well, I'm game. I'm open to it." So they pushed me down the stairs and I went tumbling down, and they said, "Well, it's pretty good. You want to do more of that?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got a young body. I might as well do it while I can. Let's do it." And that sort of ended up putting me in different opportunities to do stunt work. And one of them was because of the Spanish soap opera market down here, to do Spanish soap operas. And they said, have you done any driving? I said, "Yeah, I've done all kinds of driving and I love driving." And they said, "Well, could you do some stunt driving?" I said, "Absolutely." So they put the hair extensions in me and they said, "All right, get in the car and you're going to be our lead character, Mario." And off I went, driving and fishtailing, doing car chases and all kinds of cool stuff. And it was such a cool experience. So
That's too great. I love
it.
I just love the Spanish soap operas because they always have like gorgeous women on them. It's stunning. It's just amazing.
Well, it was funny too, because I think even one of the ones that I did that was late in the night, we were filming through the middle of the night and we were storming a house, and they said, we were all in SWAT gear, me and a couple other extras and stunt guys. And they said, "Could you be the SWAT team leader?" And I said, "Well, I don't speak Spanish and all these other guys do." And he said, "Yeah, that's okay. Can you say no te muevas?" And I said, "Yeah, I can say no te muevas." He said, "Can you say al piso?" I said, "Yeah, I can say al piso." He said, "Can you say vamos?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Good, squad leader." And I was like, "All right." And I had speaking lines, and we had a whole watch party, me and my buddies, and we were all watching it. And there I was, my tactical gear and an AR-15 and shooting blanks into this house and storming the house, yelling, "No te muevas, al piso." And, it was like my claim to fame.
Too funny. I also noticed you have a certification in conversational hypnosis. Now, I'm aware that hypnosis can help people solve issues like stopping smoking, losing weight, things like that. And it can also make people act like chickens on a stage.
Right.
What is conversational hypnosis and how do you use that?
Yeah, it's a lot less of what we, when we're thinking about like the turning someone into a chicken or having them, fall asleep, on command. You're not putting people under. It's really more of the influence through the use of language and putting people into a state that has them really dialed in, really connected, and energized to take action. So my use of language, and all my clients know this, is I'm a stickler for language. So if I hear someone say something, I'll quickly say, "Hey, I noticed that you said this. Tell me more about that." And we'll start to modify the way that language is used. But I'm also doing that throughout all my coaching as well. I'm very intentional with the words I use, how I present them, the cadence, the pitch, the tone, the volume, all of that. And, if you can do that in such a way as I was trained to do through this conversational hypnosis certification, you realize that you can put people in a state that has them much more receptive to different perspectives, different ideas that they can then incorporate in their own way.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, I do the same thing, by the way, with my coaching clients. Not conversational hypnosis, because I'm certainly not trained in that. But I do listen to every word they say, and I pick them apart and give them other things, because I believe that one word, truly one word, can be the difference between closing a sale and not. And I love what you said. It's not just the word, it's how you say it. It's your tonality, it's your speed, your inflection, all that stuff is crucial. One of the services that you offer is job placement coaching. What advice do you have for today's maybe graduating college seniors who are facing a tough market for a variety of reasons?
Yeah. So the job placement, I work with this incredible professional. We are dear friends. We've been working together now for a handful of years. Eileen Ryan, and she is a job search strategist. And she is, I mean, she doesn't like when I say it, but she is a miracle worker. What she does for her clients is incredible. I mean, people who have been looking for work on their own for, 6, 9, 15 months, and she gets them placed in their dream job, not just a job, their dream job in, in a matter of weeks. It's incredible. And I think a lot of what comes out of that, because, we pass a lot of business back and forth, she and I, is about teeing these individuals up, to answer your question, for deciding, again, sort of this inside out versus outside in. We've spent so much of our lives thinking about what we should do, what we need to do, what we have to do, and just asking the question, what would you really love to do? Like, what, and it's not this hokey, like, just follow your dreams, follow your passion, but you're like, really, like, what do you want to spend your day doing? Who do you want to spend your day with? What kinds of conversations do you want to be having? What kind of things do you want to be challenged by? Do you want to learn? I bet if we actually get really clear on that, you're going to find something that aligns with that. And you're going to feel much more connected to going out and asking people about that opportunity, or, applying to those jobs. Energetically, it's going to be received very differently in an interview. I mean, lots of people go on interviews and they say, I've been on dozens of interviews and I haven't been offered a job. And I say this not as like as a brag, but I've never been called into an actual in-person interview that I haven't been offered a job for. And the reason why, there are dozens and dozens that I've never been called back for, but the ones that I have actually been called in to interview for, I've always been offered an opportunity. Why? Because how I show up in that conversation leaves them feeling like that's someone they want as part of their organization. I wasn't fixated on the right answers or talking myself up. It was about connecting. It was about being relatable. It was about being real and authentic. And when you walk out of the room, they might remember something that I said that was, pithy or sexy or something, or they may just say, you know what, that was a great conversation. What a great candidate. Let's have him back.
Sounds like she might be a good guest for this show. I think.
She'd be a dream guest. She's fantastic.
Well, I'd love an introduction. Yeah. About a month ago, you posted, if you're constantly stepping in, you're teaching your team to step back. And when I read that, I'm like, yeah, exactly right. At one point, I was the co-national sales director for a company called Frost & Sullivan, which is a marketing consulting firm. And I had 45 people working for me in inside sales and on the phones all day. And, we had a system where I could walk around with a headset and I could plug into somebody's phone and listen to the conversation that we were having. And it was all I could do most of the time to hold myself back from saying, shut up, here's how you do it. And I would take over the call, which I didn't do. But the reason I didn't do it was because even though I wanted to close the deal, I realized by taking it over, I wasn't actually supporting them. I was fishing for them instead of teaching them how to fish. Is that what you're talking about? Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's conditioning. I mean, leaders have such a responsibility to create a space where people can, reach their full potential. And that, that idea of full potential can be a little bit of a trap because, what does that mean for individual to individual? And you don't know until you actually give them the space to fulfill that. But I think leaders oftentimes think, well, I know exactly how it's supposed to be done. I'm just going to step in and do it. And in urgent situations, as I tell my clients, in an urgent situation, that's absolutely appropriate. Like 100%, if it's time sensitive or it's urgent, by all means, feel free to step in and you can debrief about that afterwards. But if you're in a sort of leadership position and you're guiding them and you're mentoring them through, skill building, and you step in all the time, you start to create the conditioning where they doubt themselves and they question, well, if I don't do it like Jeff, am I doing it right? And the reality is like, well, you don't have to do it like me. You just need to do it like you, that feels right and feels good for you. And then we're going to start to see things take shape from that place. But if you're doing it by second guessing yourself all the time, and that happens naturally as we're first getting into something new. But if a leader steps in constantly over and over and over again, there's creating a condition, not only with that individual, but culturally, that you need to check with me first. And it hampers innovation, it hampers creativity, connection, like authentic connection that people have with their work, because they think this isn't mine anymore, this is Jeff's. And I think that's the piece where kudos to you for not stepping in, even though, it's tough not to in those moments. And I think a lot of micromanagers think, okay, well, micromanaging is bad. Well, it's like, well, micromanaging, we don't have to think about micromanaging as bad, because some people might need that level of support. But what is it creating? What's the impact of that?
Yeah. I didn't want to train my people to bring me in as the closer.
That's right.
Because that's what I'm doing. I would be training them to need me all the time. And
right.
I think the goal of a leader or a manager is train your people to not need you, to get the job done without you, so that everybody's prospering.
Yeah. A great indicator of that, Jeff, is like when a client of mine will go on vacation and they come back and nothing's been done. And it's a laundry list of things that they were waiting to check with the CEO about before they move forward. And it's like, ooh, how have you created those conditions to where that person didn't feel empowered or trusted enough to make those decisions on their own, and they needed to wait for you to come back? It's probably because you step in all the time.
Yeah. And you can tell when you're dealing with a company where the employees are empowered and when they're not. And the
100%.
Perfect example to me is Zappos. If you've ever bought shoes from Zappos and needed their customer service, it's unbelievable. In fact, if you read the book by Tony Hsiu, he said, we're not a shoe company. We're a customer service company that happens to sell shoes. And I've had to use their customer service a couple of times. And it's beyond belief how good it is. They're empowered to spend without any questions, without asking for permission, up to a certain amount. And I've never had a situation where they've had to go, I got to go ask somebody. I don't want to waste your time with a long story, but just incredible. So we want to empower our people and teach them how to think on their own, just like kids. I don't want my kids to need. There's a piece of me that wishes they still needed me, but they don't, and I'm proud of that. I don't really want them to. I want them to call me and tell me how wonderful their life is going, rather than, Dad, what should I do here? And I'm honored that they sometimes do still come to me for that advice.
Sure.
To me, that's part of being a leader, a father, a manager, is how do I help people be self-sufficient? My oldest daughter just bought her first car. And she did say, Dad, I've never bought a car before. What should I do? Blah, blah, blah. And I was happy to give her that. I didn't buy the car for her. I introduced her to the right person. She got the car. She made the decision. I don't want them to need me all the time. As much as my ego might want that, that's not serving them,
Yeah. Well, you called it out. I mean, that's an ego play, right? I mean, that's really serving your ego. And I think that the beautiful thing about that, not to get super hokey about it, is that you've created a level of psychological safety for your kids where they feel like they can call you when they need to or when they want to. And they know that they don't have to if they feel confident enough to make the choice on their own. And if you think about that in like the professional context, that's exactly what you want your employees to feel like too, your sales team. You want them to go out there and do their thing the way that they do it. And if they get to a point where they're like, I can really benefit from a conversation with Jeff, hey, doors open, come on in.
Yeah. My kids also, by the way, know that I hate talking on the phone. So that maybe they hesitate to call me. And by the way, they make a game out of seeing who can keep Dad on the phone the longest. We're in a group chat. I kept Dad on the phone for 27 minutes. I kept him on for 42 minutes.
That's funny.
Because they know about 5 minutes and I'm like, guys, I talk to people all day long.
Right.
Really? And look, don't get me wrong. I love hearing from my children. They're my best friends. Them and my dog. They're the four things I care most about. But I can tell you this for a fact. When my phone rings at night, it's like, who the F is calling me now? Oh, it's Avery. Okay, I'll talk to her.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm watching the time. We've got a million more questions. Hey, how about this one? You say that optimism is a leadership skill. How does one stay optimistic in today's incredibly chaotic world? I mean, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about here.
Sure.
Amazingly optimistic guy, brilliant guy. But I got to believe that even Tony Robbins himself, who's amazingly optimistic, if he's listening to the news all day long, it's tough. So how do we stay optimistic in a world that's chaotic? I think that's a generous description for today.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think a lot of people struggle with that. And I think that it's very natural that people are, right? I mean, I think that it's impossible to just ignore the noise or to tune out what's actually happening in the world or around us or even immediately close to us, right? If we've got dysfunction in our family or traumatic events, things like that. I mean, all that stuff is real. I think that what it comes down to is perspective. So I've adopted a practice for myself. Like anytime that something challenging happens or I find myself overwhelmed by something, because I'm a human being and those things happen, right? I say thank you. And I actually like consciously say it out loud, where I'll sit with it and I'll be like, all right, thank you. Because I know there's something in it for me. And I think that, that's circumstantial. I mean, when something happens, but like the sort of the constant noise that's out there is, making a distinction between being informed and absorbing this in such a way that then impacts sort of from this outside in, right? Outside in thinking. Are you taking everything that's happening outside of yourself and letting it shape you on the inside? Or are you starting here and then letting what you know to be true about your internal expectations, your internal knowing, shape what's happening outside of you? And it's not shaping it as in like, change the direction of global events, but change the way that you relate to them. And I think that's the piece that's so important. And that comes back full circle to the self-leadership concept. That's why self-leadership for me is so important and it's so powerful. Is like, there's so much going on out there in the world outside of ourselves. If I start from outside myself, if I wake up and I start doom scrolling as soon as I wake up, it's going to be a hard way to set the intention for the day from a place that feels aligned with who I am. So I start with, where am I at? What do I want to do today? And of course, I'm going to hear news sound bites here and there, and I'll filter those through, but I'm filtering them through the clarity I've already created from the inside out.
Yeah. I struggle a bit with my desire to be well-informed, because it is a chaotic world, and not wanting to hear constant bad news. We are running out of time. So if someone wanted to lead themselves at a higher level starting today, where should they start?
It's going to be a very coachy response, and I can fully appreciate that. It's really, honestly, it's just noticing. I think a lot of people are, will ask, just tell me what to do, just tell me what to say. And the reality is, like, there's no silver bullet solution to this. There's no one size fits all remedy to, the questions that we have day to day. I think the noticing piece is the most important, because if you can start to notice much more naturally, much more comfortably, it becomes second nature to notice things when things come up, and notice a reaction that you're having to someone that you're in a conversation with. Notice the reaction you have to something that they say or the way they say it. Notice your reaction to the piece of news that you just heard, and then how that impacts the rest of your day. If you can start to notice those things, then you can decide, wow, when I heard that news update, man, I carried that for the next 2 hours, and it really affected the way that I showed up in my next couple of calls. What am I going to do differently with that now that I know that? And that noticing just is the self-awareness piece that we always hear about. But what it does is it then puts you in a place where you can then sort of take that into action. And that's the self-leadership piece. Now, what do you want to do with it? So I think the noticing is a big one for a lot of folks.
Love that. Well, I'm noticing that we're out of time, and I could talk to you all day, my friend. But before we go, I'm going to share my screen. Would you please tell people how to reach you if they're interested in working with you as a speaker, as a coach, or anything like that?
Yeah, and, absolutely.
There are people who are watching this live right now, or will watch it on replay, but it'll also get converted to a podcast. So if you could please spell it out for people who will be listening, how can they reach you?
Happily. Yeah. You can email me at hakim@lakhdarcoaching.com. That's Hakim, Hakim, at lakhdarcoaching.com, LAKHDAR coaching.com. That will usually come directly to me. I might have a VA pick it up here and there, but I'll see all that stuff come through. That's the best way to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn and pretty active on LinkedIn, as you mentioned, Jeff. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm doing all kinds of stuff on there, in terms of lives, conversations, posts. I really like putting content out that has people thinking and creating some insight for leaders, in whatever industry, whatever role they're in. So those are the two best ways to find me. You can check out my website, lakhdarcoaching.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, all the social media channels. But yeah, email and LinkedIn are the two best ways.
And remember, Lakhdar is LAKHDAR. And you have a Facebook group too, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's Creating Career Clarity. So love my alliteration.
As do I. Well, my friend, we are out of time, but before we go, I'll end as I always do. First of all, thank you for sharing your genius so brilliantly and generously with us. I appreciate that. And guys, remember that sales is a game of making things happen. Get out there and make sales happen. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great weekend, Hakim. See you soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care, everybody.